Hey everybody, it's Nathaniel Avila. I'm here in Greater Orlando and I'm here with Timbrel Hildebrand reporting from Crowley, Texas.
Yep, that's me.
Yep. And today we're going to be talking about Tron Legacy. Is that right?
Yep.
All right. So, what did you think of this film?
Tron Legacy, I didn't think it was that bad. I've only heard bad things about it, so I kind of went into it thinking it was going to be some sort of last airbender mishap or debacle. And I mean, I thought it was an okay movie.
Okay. So that's pretty good. It's a pretty good review. So, some backstory about Tron Legacy. It first started off as like the original film that came out in 1982. A lot of people liked it, even though it did okay at the box office. It only got $33 million. It was also the first computer animated based feature film that Disney made. Uh, but it later developed into like a cult classic type thing, which, and a lot of people thought that Pixar was going to make a sequel in 1999, which I don't think ever happened. So rumors of a sequel of Tron was came out in like 2003 when a first person shooter video game came out called Tron 2.0, which was later hinted to be like have like another film after, depends on how well the game went. So there goes that. So the plans for Tron Legacy came to be in 2005, 2 years later, when Walt Disney Studios hired the screenwriters Brian Klugman and Lee Sternthal to write the script. So, and the two had recently wrote the script for Warrior, back in 2011. Well, I think that's how it went. I don't know. Uh, so according to Klugman said that it was. I think that he said that the visual, like the technology, came up with the story at that time. So they think that they could do that because they believe that Tron was mostly remembered as the visual style, not so much the story. So that's the way that they were going with it. They were really focusing on that visual style. And so in 2007, uh, Disney began to negotiate with Kosinski, the guy who would eventually direct the film. And he admitted at the time that he didn't really like the idea, but he started to, it grew on him after time passed. So he was involved in a meeting with Bailey, who was the president of Walt Disney Pictures at the time, and he was asked if he could make the film, which he did. So he wanted to embrace like a general ambiance of like the film. Like he wanted to emulate like the Matrix in that way for
Mm-hmm.
for this particular film. So that was the model that he was going off of. Uh, so that's basically what they were going. So Kaczynski and Bailey were kind of on odds and ends because that's kind of what he wanted. I think Bailey wanted to use like the internet as a way, or something like
Mm-hmm.
that, or was it Kaczynski? One of those two. But anyway, they were kind of at odds and ends, and they couldn't really agree on a perspective to conceive the film. So Kaczynski lent him the money to create like a conceptual prototype of Tron Legacy, which was eventually presented in 2009 at Comic Con. Uh, so that's what he did. So and also he was also Kaczynski was also a graduate at Columbia for architecture. So he really used that in order to like create the set design of Tron Legacy. Uh, so which so that's what he did. He mostly focused on the design points and all that kind of stuff. Uh, and that's pretty much it. That's what he did.
Well, wow.
So
Cool.
upon knowing that they mostly focused on the production design rather than the story, does that come as a shock to you?
No, that doesn't come as a shock to me. I think that's a fairly ordinary mindset when it comes to making action movies in general, not just Tron. And the fact that the 80s Tron, like, the 80s Tron movie is just, it's incredible if you think about how much work they had to put into to do these special effects that nowadays would be easily achieved, like using a green screen and CGI and stuff like that. So, I mean, it makes sense that they were trying to kind of take that up to the next level because Tron is such a visual sort of, it was a visual phenomenon. So they were kind of trying to mimic that with the new Tron movie. So, I mean, I can see why they would do that because what they did in the 80s was so extraordinary because no one had really seen anything like this before. In fact, I even read that the Academy Award disqualified Tron from getting from getting nominated for Best Special Effects in 1982 because they considered computer animation cheating at that time.
Really?
Yeah, if only they could see where we are now. But yeah, so I mean, I don't think it's the only thing is like with this new Tron movie, as cool and breathtaking as I think the effects were very well done personally. But the thing is, since it came out in an era where stuff like that wasn't as, I guess, impressive, because, you know, we had already had stuff like, Iron Man and Avatar, and at least I think Avatar had come out, or The Matrix and stuff like that. But I still think it was pretty impressive because the effects were creative. They were interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely the highlight of the film. So, how does this film compare to the original?
Honestly, I was expecting this movie to be really bad because I've heard only bad things about it. I've heard that's all that I've heard. I've seen a lot of videos about like some of the worst sequels, some of the worst, I guess, movies that were worse than their trailers, stuff like that. And I've heard this movie doesn't have very much going for it. But I liked the movie. But in regard to how it compares to the 1980s version, I would definitely say all the way the 80s version is better. And that's just because it's just because what Tron was doing in the 80s was so much more, I don't want to say groundbreaking, but it was so unique for the time period as well. Like it was new and fresh. So I can't really compare it to the one that happened now. But I will say that I think after watching Tron Legacy, right after watching the original Tron, I will say that it plays out very similarly to the original Tron movie in regard to, it's obviously not going to be a movie full of really deep character development and drama and stuff. It's going to be mostly about an action sequence, a hero's journey through a bunch of crazy action sequences. And in a way, I kind of felt like it played out like the 80s movie of Tron, just in a more modern action movie context. It played out more like an action movie of that time in 2010.
Yeah.
But yeah, for sure, the 80s one, I have to say the 80s one is better, just because it was such an interesting story, it was original, and the effects are just mind-boggling for the time period.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like, what did we think about how Tron, like the character, was portrayed in this new one? Because he never talks. Well, he talks like I think like 2 or 3 lines of dialogue.
Yeah, that's probably the one thing that is a little bit. I mean, it makes sense, I suppose, because in the original movie, the main character was Jeff Bridges' character, Flynn. He was the protagonist. So that was what was so interesting about the original Tron movie, is that it was an ensemble cast. Like, it didn't necessarily just focus on the main character, because you had Flynn, just as like a rough kind of summary, basically Flynn, who plays the dad in this movie, Jeff Bridges, he gets sucked into a video game on accident while he's trying to hack into this computer, and he meets Tron inside of the game. And it's very complex, but long story short, like, Tron and Flynn kind of go separate ways at one point and sort of have their own mission. So while Flynn is the main character, Tron still has a very strong presence and kind of like his own story going forth. It was very 80s in that, like, it didn't necessarily have like a centralized character. Very, I guess you could say, Star Wars-esque, where everybody was kind of doing their own thing. But yeah, so I guess it makes sense that Tron would kind of take a back seat in this next movie, because it's mainly about Flynn and Flynn's son. But same time, the movie is called Tron. So it's a little bit disappointing that Tron takes a huge backseat throughout the entire movie, because it's not really about Tron's legacy, it's about Flynn's legacy. But then again, I mean, you gotta call it Tron, because no one's gonna come see a movie called Flynn's legacy. But yeah, it is a little disappointing that Tron took such a backseat in this movie. I mean, you saw his, I guess, you know, in the old movie, Tron was created by Alan, who shows up in this movie as kind of Sam's surrogate father or something, friend of Flynn, stuff like that. So you see him a little bit, but he played a very large role in the original movie. Tron, I mean, like, it's called Tron. It's mainly about Tron. But this one isn't really about Tron or Tron's legacy. It's more about Flynn's legacy, which makes sense. Yet at the same time, it's kind of disappointing that Tron really didn't play much of a role at all in this movie.
Yeah. Do we like that Tron was actually a bad guy a little bit in this film?
That's another thing. Like, that was interesting, but it was just kind of like they mentioned it at the beginning, and it kind of played into the end, and then at the end he's like, oh no, I got to protect the users. You know, I feel like it might have been better if he had played as much of a role as Clue had, because Clue was like our main antagonist. You know, he took up a lot of time, and I feel like, you know, in a movie called Tron, we should see a little bit more Tron. I mean, if Tron had turned evil, I feel like maybe we could have replaced that sort of crony that hung around Clue the entire movie and had more of Tron, and you could have seen more of his maybe conflict of how he's been reprogrammed, but how he still wants to help the users and stuff like that. So I do feel like there could have been more of Tron in this movie. Like, if you haven't seen the original Tron and you watch this movie, I feel like you watch it thinking, okay, why is this thing called Tron Legacy when literally Tron's in there for like 2 seconds?
Yeah, exactly. I do like your idea a lot better.
Yeah.
What
And I know that the whole idea was that once Flynn got out of the game, he made this game called Tron. So maybe that's more of the point. But at the same time, kind of sad to see Tron get sidelined.
Yeah. So, like, do we like Jeff Bridges, like, de-aging with Clue?
If there's one thing that really, and I mean, you have to take into account that the de-aging technology was not in its prime. Like, it was just being tried out. This is X-Men Last Stand kind of de-aging technology. So yes, the de-aging was very distracting. It looked like, you know, it looked like a video game, which, I mean, you could argue works for the context, but it was particularly distracting at the beginning, where he's talking to his kid and you have a regular kid and then like a CGI'd Jeff Bridges. I think it probably would have been better for them to just rely on makeup, because I mean, Jeff Bridges wasn't young, that's for sure. He definitely didn't look like he did in 1982, but I feel like that would have been less distracting if we had just like browned up his hair and stuff for the young version of himself than trying to do the, like, I think they were trying to do too much of it was too much of an undertaking for them to try in such a rudimentary state of those special effects, because it was really distracting.
Yeah, I thought that too. Like, that's exactly the thought that went across my head when I was watching the film. That, wow, you look like a PS2 video game character. So,
Yeah.
like, so what do you think about, like, the central theme of perfection that this film has, like the constant quest for perfection?
What I love about not just this movie, but what I loved about the original Tron movie was this sort of almost allegorical story being told of kind of like humans against God, that sort of thing.
Uh-huh.
Because in the original Tron movie, the whole thing is certain people believe in the users, which are like God. You know, they created them and stuff like that. And what's going on is that the people who believe in the users are being persecuted, they're being killed, they're being, you know, forced into these games because the leaders inside the tech world or whatever are trying to tell them there's no user, this is all there is, and you need to do what we say. So I think that is really cool, and I think they played up on that in this one, because that's what I loved so much about the original movie, and I was kind of afraid they were going to kind of toss aside that that sort of allegory in this movie, but I think they still kind of kept it with the whole, not just man trying to say God isn't there, but man trying to conquer God, because that's really the theme of this, because Clue is all about, oh no, we're going to take over, what he, his world, it's not up to the user, it's up to us, that sort of thing. And it's showing kind of the corruption that springs from, this guy trying to go against his creator and stuff like that. So the whole thing about perfection, the perfection thing did seem a little, I guess it seemed a little convoluted, a theme, because it was that and the theme I just talked about was like man versus God. So I guess the whole theme, the whole point is like perfection, for humans just isn't possible. And within this creation, that's what Flynn was realizing, that like he couldn't have perfection in what he was making. And when Clue tried to get perfection, he ended up hurting a bunch of people. So, I feel like that scene was a little convoluted, but it still kind of plays into the whole thing of, like, I guess, God thinking man thinking they can run things better than God, stuff like that. So, I thought it was an interesting theme.
Yeah, so we believe there's like a religious thing that's going on in this film.
Yeah, that's what it kind of felt like to me.
Yeah, I couldn't help but draw that comparison myself when I was watching. I couldn't help but comparing Sam, who is the son of Flynn, to be like this Christ-like figure to them.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Like maybe he's kind of like a messianic figure. I don't think they really harped on that, but it definitely did kind of feel that way in certain scenarios.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we got like Clue, who's supposed to be like this Lucifer-like person who believes that he's better than God,
Yeah.
and tried to like gather an army of other angels and fought and then lost, and then became like the Fallen. So that's a very interesting comparison.
Yeah.
And how do you think Cora plays into all this, which is Olivia Wilde's character?
I liked her. I think it's very easy in movies like these, if you don't get a good actress, to make a character like her super annoying, because she feels like, let's be honest, a lot of the reason she's there is window dressing. She's a pretty girl, and you gotta have a pretty girl in an action film, which is a little irritating. But that aside, they made her interesting because Olivia Wilde is very talented. So I ended up liking her because she sort of had this, I guess, childlike desire in herself to learn. Like, she wanted to learn, and she had this kind of like childlike goodness in her also. Like, she wanted to help Sam, she wanted to help Flynn, she wanted to do the right thing, and she was willing to put herself on the line to help her friends. So I liked her. I think she was, obviously she's fairly two-dimensional. Most of the characters in this are two-dimensional, but I feel like they built enough on her, her being part of that race of people, I guess, that everyone wanted to destroy and stuff, kind of how she had like that baggage of all her people being destroyed. That really added to who she was, as a character.
Yeah, she also kind of probably just became more of a MacGuffin than anything, because they had to like deliver her to humanity or something like that.
Yeah, I never really understood that. That's the one thing. I didn't really get why she was so important. Like, they said that there was something about these, like, what did they call them, ISOs or something? ISOs?
They called them
right?
ISOs, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, like, I wasn't really sure why they were so important. I guess because he didn't create them, they just kind of sprouted up out of the program. Was that supposed to be what was going on?
I think so.
That's the one thing. That was not clear. So I think they should have been a little more clear with that.
Yeah, I don't think the writers knew what it was either. I think they just wanted. I guess if they thought that if they say they're important enough a couple times, they'll just believe it, like the audience.
Honestly, they probably could have cut that entire subplot out and just made her somebody that like he rescued from Clue or something like that. Like, she could have been a rebel, and it still would have made sense that like she went back with Sam just because Flynn wants to protect her or something, because she's kind of like a surrogate daughter or something like that.
Yeah.
I think that still would have worked.
And then also, like, she also appeared in the real world with her body and everything. Does that really make sense?
It makes just about as much sense as Sam getting sucked into the game.
I guess you're right. So Yeah. So we got that. Did you see Daft Punk?
I'm sorry.
Did you see Daft Punk, the DJ group?
Oh, the ones that were like in the bar or whatever.
Yeah.
That was a little weird. I felt like that was some uh, misplaced comedic presence in the film.
Yeah. This also kind of also brings to light of the character of what's his name, Castor slash Zeus.
Zeus, yeah.
Yeah. What did we think about him?
I actually thought it's really funny because I've seen that actor. His name won't come to me right now. It's Michael.
It's Michael Sheen.
Michael Sheen. Yes,
Yes.
yes, that's what I thought it was. Yeah, I've seen him in a lot of kind of like mediocre to really bad movies. Or like, okay, one time, okay,
Yeah.
this is terrible. One time, me and my roommate, we decided we were going to watch all the Twilight movies to make fun of them, and they're terrible, by the way. They're so much worse than you could possibly imagine. But he's in those movies, and it's funny because he's a very accomplished actor. He's in a lot of stuff. Been in Nixon, Frost versus Nixon, where he does a really good job. He's a very talented actor. So it's really funny to see him in these mediocre movies because I get the feeling. I got the feeling in this movie, the same feeling that I got when I was watching that Twilight movie, that he knows that this movie is mediocre, so he can do pretty much whatever the heck he wants while he's on camera. So that's why he's so like flamboyant and over the top. But it was, I mean, he was still enjoyable, but it really did feel like he was just seeing how far he could push it.
Yeah. Well, like in the Twilight films, would he be like the best part of that film?
I don't know. It's hard to say anything is good about those movies.
Oh snap! So yeah, like he's like viewed as like this character. The character of Zeus is like this person who lost faith in the users and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Where he used to fight for the ISOs, but then after the battle was lost, he kind of lost faith in all that and basically alleged to his allegiance to Clue, and then betrayed them.
Yeah.
So I guess you can call him like, if we're sticking with the religious angle, I guess he could be like the Judas of the film.
I guess, yeah. I mean, yeah, he didn't play a huge role, but yeah, he definitely didn't help them out.
Yeah. Also, what did you think about like the? There's a lot more guys in this film than women.
I mean, that doesn't surprise me. That's very common in an action flick that it's a bunch of dudes. I mean, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
It doesn't bother. It doesn't bother me either. I mean, if you make a good movie, it doesn't really matter to me who's in it, as long as it's a good story. If the story can support itself, then it doesn't. It shouldn't matter who is leading it necessarily.
Yeah. So like, what did we think about like Sam's arc of the film?
Sam. That's the thing. I like the actor who plays Sam. I've seen him in other stuff, so I know he's fairly talented. But the only thing about him is, I feel like we didn't really get to. Like, I feel like I almost feel like Cora's character was better developed than his, because his. I mean, while I liked Sam, I think they made him fairly likable. Some of his, I guess, his cockiness sometimes came off as a bit unbelievable. It's like, oh, I just got sucked into a video game. Well, time to kick some butt,
Yeah.
and crack some one-liners, which again kind of falls into the stereotypical leading man action hero thing. So, I mean, you really kind of have to look at it through that lens. But I will say that his character was fairly interesting. I thought it was really. I think that something that this Tron movie does have that's a little bit different from the original movie is that there's a little bit more of a heart to it because you have that relationship between him and his dad. I do think that could have been better developed, but it definitely like touched my heart when he saw his dad for the first time. They hugged each other and both of them were crying. I thought that was nice, but I do think they could have built on that a little bit more. And I think if they kind of, I guess, allocated a little bit of the time that they used for all of those fancy special effects to developing more of their relationship, then it would have been just that much more heartbreaking when the dad sacrificed himself.
Yeah.
That's the only thing. I feel like they could have built more on that relationship, but I liked what they had still.
Yeah. I like the fact that Flynn did still say like a bunch of 80s slang in his dialogue.
See, that felt forced to me.
That was
Felt really
forced?
forced. I mean, I didn't mind it, but that is pretty funny. movie slang.
Yeah. The next time when I meditate, I'm gonna say I'm gonna knock on the sky and listen to the sound.
Oh, that was interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I love Jeff Bridges. It's really hard for me not to like Jeff Bridges in pretty much anything I've seen him in. He's just such a talented actor, and he has such a presence on screen. It's his presence on screen can immediately make me like a movie just a little bit more because he's in it.
Yeah.
And I
Um.
also thought it was interesting. The actor they had playing Sam, I don't know his name. It's Garrett Heldman, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
I felt like he was kind of doing a little bit of Jeff Bridges in his performance. So that was interesting too.
Yeah. So, final thoughts on the film?
I mean, I thought it was okay. I think it kind of gets. I think people are a little harder on it than they should be because, I mean, it really is just an action film. And if you look at it as just an action film, I don't really have a problem with it. I think it's entertaining. It has really cool special effects. It's got great music. So, I mean, if you're just looking for a fun movie, I'd say that Tron Legacy is a fun movie. I wouldn't necessarily call it a good movie per se.
All right. Would you recommend it?
Yeah, I tell people to check it out.
Yeah, I would give it like a mediocre score, like a 6 or a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. If you want to watch more Tron, there is a TV show that's out called Tron Uprising.
Yeah, that happened. That came out a while back. It's got like Elijah Wood doing a voice in it, I believe. I watched some of it when I was a kid.
Yeah. I don't know if it's on Disney Plus or not, but I mean, it's worth a
Probably
try.
is.
Yeah. It was on for like one season.
Yeah, so it must not have been that great, or people just didn't like it.
Yeah. So, yeah, if you can check this out, but I would suggest watching the first one first.
Yes, watch the original Tron. That movie is really cool. I can see why it's gotten such a great cult following because it has it has an interesting story, and just the special effects alone are enough to watch that movie because it's just so groundbreaking for its time period. I recommend you watch it. It's so good.
Yeah, I'll do that as
You
ASAP.
will understand Tron Legacy much more if you
Yeah,
watch Tron.
absolutely. All right,
You
so
definitely shouldn't watch Tron Legacy without watching Tron first.
yeah, because I watched it in theaters in 2010 when I never even saw the original, so I got to do that.
Yeah, that's probably what most kids did. They're probably just like, ooh, sparkly lights. But yeah,
So yeah, I've been Nathaniel Avila. This has been Timbrel Hildebrand, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.